Are you feeling a little bit like a ping pong these days with all the changes happening to our industry seemingly all at once? If so, then you are not alone. Today, I sit down with Kathleen Metcalf, who is a real estate coach extraordinaire, and she shares some really simple strategies to help take your production to the next level. As always, I'm your referral partner out of San Francisco, Shawn Kunkler. Kathleen, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm thoroughly excited to sit down with you, and I feel like this whole thing has been very serendipitous as to how our worlds collided. But really quick for our listeners who are getting introduced to you, who are you and what do you do?
I'm a real estate agent with Elite Builders and EXP. I'm based in Vermont, and I have a company called Cambium, which is real estate operations for agents at every level.
Nice. It's funny. I was just literally visiting family last week in Connecticut. And while I was there, I, of course, look at real estate. And I stumbled onto this amazing 50-acre house in Vermont. And I'm like, my partner, Cielo, I'm like, hey, what do you think we move to Vermont?
We have high-speed fiber optic internet.
That's amazing. I know your internet's phenomenal. So I know briefly chatting with you, your business now was not where you started. You kind of evolved there. How did you even get into this real estate business to start with?
I was introduced to a real estate agent in San Francisco by the man who managed my apartment building.
That is so wild.
It's really wild. So this is my second career. My first career was in recruiting and training in the retail industry.
Okay.
And that parlayed into a consulting business where I helped SiliconValley.com businesses hire their first HR person because they'd finished hiring all their friends. Now they didn't know how to run a business from the inside. And so I did that for 7 years, and I closed that business and got introduced to Nina Hatvani in San Francisco, who, unbeknownst to me, was one of the top 10 agents in the city. And she said, well, could you help me? And could you work for me? And could you come work for me full time? And could you get licensed? And so it just snowballed into this wonderful thing. And she was an incredible introduction to the industry.
That's wild. She is such a kind person.
Yes.
So my history in real estate, I was working these open houses. I met this guy. Fast forward, he found a property, wrote an offer. Was my first sale in San Francisco was for 2.675, and it was Nina's listing. And so I had the amazing opportunity to do my first sale with Nina. And so
that's so great.
There's a very special place in my heart for that whole experience.
Yes.
And she was just you imagine people at a certain level in business to be cutthroat and just like a sharper edge. 100% not her. Just really sweet, really kind. Wow, my mind is kind of blown that your first soiree into this world was like basically just immediately top shelf, which is really cool.
Yes, and my first day on the job was helping her host a broker's open in Seacliff.
If people aren't familiar with San Francisco, Seacliff is where Robin Williams owned a house. It's kind of like
Sharon Stone,
I mean, you name the person and they live there. There's all kinds of just amazing names that have lived in that little pocket. Wow.
I came home and said, wow, this is quite a job that I've stumbled into. This is fantastic.
Yeah.
I wish I knew then what I know now. I would have been even better performer for her, but I did my best.
That is just, it's so incredible. And so at that point, I mean, this is a few years back. Aside from assisting her, were you working on putting together systems, or were the systems already in place? Like, what was your evolution there?
I followed the way she did things, right? Because I didn't know any better. One of the things I saw right away, having come from a background in recruiting, was that it was a parallel universe. In recruiting, you're the middle person between people and jobs. And in real estate, I could see right away, oh, now we're the middle people between people and property. Okay, so we're just trying to make a match and then get everyone through the process to either hire a person or buy or sell a property, right? So I was like, okay. So Nina had her own system, and so I followed along, and maybe I made, the extra whiteboard or a calendar or a checklist or, things like that. I made a binder for myself. I mean, this is 20 years ago, right? So it was a lot of paper then, to be able to learn all the acronyms and what are all the forms called, because there was a nickname for everything and it wasn't written on the form. And, so I had to find my own ways to teach myself things. But then I was just really trying to keep up with her and keep up with the flow of things and offer every skill and every element of my working knowledge to be able to support her. And that was fast and furious, but it was a joy.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, her numbers, her team's numbers are always staggering. She's in the very top percentile.
Yes.
Across the board. How did you then take that and parlay that into your next business? Like,
so
what was
when
that
I actually asked her if I could sell with her, she let me know, well, my family's going to take over the business. And she said, but you should really do that because you'd be a great agent. So I became an agent in the office. And I did that for a little while, but I wasn't really crazy about being a real estate agent exclusively. And so I decided, this is 2007. So what I also didn't know is that something was coming.
Oh, yeah.
So I was an agent on the ground from 2002 to 2007. And so that's all I knew was that market. And so coincidentally, I decided I wanted to move home and where my family is, which is in the East Coast. So after 18 years in San Francisco, I decided to move to Vermont. And I came home, and I didn't really want to be an agent, so I got introduced by a mutual friend to what happened to then be the #1 coach for the Mike Ferry organization, a real estate coaching company, who she's now retired, worked out of her house in my little town in Vermont.
That's amazing. I feel like this is like the real life Forrest Gump amazing, like these like serendipitous, like, oh my goodness, now I'm working for the next #1. That is wild.
Yes. And so when she saw my resume of having all this experience in human resources, and then I had been an assistant and an agent. So she hired me on the spot and was like, when can you start? And I worked for her for 6 years, and it was really perfect in my little town. And I was underemployed in many ways, but she was also so useful, and she always pulled out my experience. What do you think about this? How could we help this client? What do you think we ought to do here? And then I took over her property management, and so my job kept growing. But then I also was in the office suite with her. So she worked, at a separate place in her home over her garage, and so we had a real office. And I could hear her coaching 65 top producers a week.
Wow.
Right.
That's a lot.
She often had a theme for the week, and she was working through. And now, remember, it's now 2007, 2008, 2009. So now I'm listening to her coach through the downturn in the economy. Mm-hmm. And I'm listening to her pull out every stop to help these people stay afloat. Well, only 10%, that's 6 of her clients, had financial difficulty. They were in either exclusively luxury, land, or overextended in credit. All of her other clients not only survived, but some of them made more money than they ever made in their lives.
Really?
So, but I kept hearing these same ceiling problems. How are you going to hire your assistant and get your prospecting done? How are you going to train them? You're not even good at that, and so I'm sitting across the room thinking, I've got to be able to help with this because I know how to hire, I know how to train. I've been an assistant and I've been an agent. So she started having me coach the assistants to her clients while I was on payroll. So I actually started my business on a headset with a binder on her washer dryer.
That's wild.
Standing in the laundry room. And then one Christmas, she said, okay, next year you need to charge people. And that was the beginning of the end. By the end of that year, I had replaced myself and started full-time recruiting and coaching.
What a cool mentor That is
Yes,
like
she's
somebody.
fantastic. Kathy Anderson is her name, and she's retired now, and she's a fantastic person. We're still very dear friends. We had dinner a couple weeks ago.
Oh, I love that. I mean, it's just, at some point the student must surpass the master, and it sounds like a really cool relationship where she's
Yes.
like coaching you of like, now you need to charge. Now, like here's your next step. And she was basically coaching you, which in business it's really hard because you don't want people to leave. But
Right?
it's
Especially
good
when
for
it's really working well.
right. But it's good for people, right? Because
Yes.
at some point they need to go and do that next thing. But it really sounds like genuinely you're just wired for this, for helping people
Yes.
see what they can't see for themselves, that's the art of being a really good coach.
Thank you.
That's incredible. I mean, talk about pivoting in 180 and Realtor 180. It sounds like you've had such incredible, I don't want to say opportunities because they're not like when they're happening to you, they're the most awful things, but it's an opportunity to pivot and find
Yes.
a new way through it, out of it, around it, over it, whatever it may be. Have you always had that? I feel like it's a mindset that you cultivate, but you also have you always had that I can do this type attitude?
I don't think I've always had it, but it is an interesting study, isn't it? Like who has grit and perseverance and
Yeah.
learns from something, and who is wounded by it and becomes sort of damaged by it and then victim to it. There is an interesting twist that I don't know all the qualities that make that distinction, but somewhere along the way, I decided that I was going to keep going and that no one was going to get me down. I do have what I consider to be kind of a burning desire to make a difference. And it seems that whatever my spirit has an intention to accomplish shall not be unlit by anything or anyone. And so, I grew up in the East Coast. I grew up in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, outside Philadelphia, in a wonderful neighborhood I actually just got to revisit 2 weeks ago on the way to a family reunion. We stopped to see where I grew up. And my parents were from here where I live in this little town in Vermont. So I grew up in a nice place, but with a father who drank. And I'm an only child, and so I was the only one, weathering through that. But I also got to see when I went back to visit, like they really tried to stay put so that I had a lot of opportunity. I had a fantastic education. I came from a really nice neighborhood, and I went to college in Florida. And so I saw that when my parents got divorced, like, okay, now I'm still going to make my own way. And then when I graduated college and I moved away from where my mother lived, from the west coast of Florida to the east coast. And if you know those differences in Florida, sometimes people on the west coast are like, yeah, see ya. Because people in Fort Lauderdale and Miami don't really hang out with people in Tampa. You know what I mean? Like, so it was just a very different way of living. But I loved it. I was in my 20s. And, then I got recruited from Miami to San Francisco by a company. That's how I got to San Francisco. And so I've just caught opportunity as it has come to me. And I think that built a strength of confidence, too, that I'm valuable, I'm worth it, I could try, someone wanted me. And so that took me well into my 30s.
It's interesting. I don't know if you know her or met her, but Ruth Refkin, she's the mother of Robert Refkin, the founder of Compass.
Yes.
I had a conversation with her, and you two, there's a odd similarity. That's she too would, these micro opportunities would come, and she would just go for it. And it's such a refreshing spirit of like, it's that I'll leap and grow my wings along the way. And you kind of you don't have all the pieces, but you kind of see where it's going. So you just go with
Trust
that
it.
opportunity. You just trust in whatever you believe in.
That's
and
right.
you kind of and you move forward with that. Wow, that's such a all of that is such an interesting. It's so interesting. I recently too went back home, and it's sometimes it's a good recalibration because you don't realize how far you've come until you
Right.
go back to the beginning, and you're like,
Right.
oh yeah, I've changed. I've changed all these different amazing aspects of my life, or it gives you a really cool, great opportunity to reflect. But
Yes.
the hard part is also it's going away.
Yeah.
And like I too picked up and moved 2 decades ago to go to this random city that I heard about sight unseen, and here we are.
Yes. Oh, I fell in love with San Francisco. I never fell out of love with it. It still frees my heart.
I love it. It's a cool place. It's definitely it's gone through its evolutions,
Yes.
and it'll continue to. But it is such an amazing 7 by 7 mile city
Yes.
that is just it's special, and it's
It is
really cool.
special.
So to move over to what you're doing now and how you're helping people, and I do see this massive need that agents are terrible, salespeople are terrible at hiring people because we don't ask hard questions. We just want to be liked. And so I am the worst person when it comes to hiring people on my team. Kat, who works with me, my operations manager, she, literally the other day, she's like, I don't think you should hire people anymore. Like, let me take care of it.
Yes. Good for her.
Yeah, it's you got to have people on your team who will hold a mirror and they have the autonomy and the ability to have hard conversations with you, because otherwise you're not going to get anything done.
Yeah, and you're supposed to hire your complement, right? So if she has recognized she is your complement, she can help you. And as long as you're in alignment about casting the vision of what is the hire supposed to be like, what are they supposed to do, how do they fit the culture, then executing the steps of getting that does not have to be the leader. It does not have to be the agent, which is why you can work with a recruiting firm to do that. If you have someone in-house to help you do that, you're a decision maker, whether or not you want that particular candidate in that particular scenario, but you don't have to learn to be good at managing the process of hiring. It's okay.
100%. I could not agree with you more. But before we talk about finding your complement, let's actually unpack, because I'm sure you've seen it 1,000 times over and over, is what's the biggest mistake agents make when hiring somebody?
They hire in their likeness.
You have no idea how many times I've heard that. It's wild. Or the other one that's super popular is they hire an agent to
That
kind
too.
of
Which
like,
is also
oh,
sometimes in their likeness, right?
exactly. That's even more in the
To
likeness.
the core, yes.
That is so funny. And so how does then one approach hiring not their likeness?
Yeah, and so we actually have a course called Hire Lab, which could be for directors of operations or for agents if they really do want to understand the flow process. But you create what we call swim lanes in our business. What is the agent going to do, and what are all the things that someone else is going to do?
Yeah.
So that they're swimming to the same race, but they are doing sales activities versus service or admin activities. And so we have checklists that you can begin to sift out. In fact, this is my rope trick. In the beginning, in a real estate career, it looks like you do everything, but you're actually doing 3 jobs. You just didn't realize it in the beginning, but these are the strands. Like there's sales, there is marketing tasks, there might be transaction management, but it all together turns into one real estate function, but it's not one job unless you want it to be. But
That
you're
is
usually
such a good, easy visual for people who are listening and not actually watching. Kathleen took a rope and unwound an end of it. And so you had 3 individual pieces that all went together and made an actual rope.
Yes.
But it is so true. And at the beginning, especially in the early days, it's really hard to lift your head up from working
Yes.
in the business to working on the business, and then figuring out, oh, actually I individually don't need to do this activity. I can
Yes.
hand this off. Handing it off is such a hard process.
So the first introduction to handing it off is a transaction coordinator. This is the best first step because transaction coordinators usually have their own process.
Yeah.
And so as an agent, you can ask the transaction coordinator, could you show me your process, please? What are all the things that you're going to do? And so how do I get you what you need? And then how are you going to update me so that I know what's going on inside the deal? And that's the first dance. That's the first cha-cha. To be able to feel, leverage, and trust an expert. And you can do that for listing coordination now and buy the deal. You can certainly do that for pending to closing.
That's interesting. And you're right. And now that I'm thinking about it in my own experience, 100%, the transaction coordinator is your first plug-in. That's the first person that you have to kind of relinquish.
Yeah, and they're supposed to be an expert, which is why it's also appropriate for you to ask them as any vendor, please explain your process to me and what can I expect from you? Yeah. And then this is what I need. Can you do that for me? And then how much does that cost? So you're creating an agreement and a contract of how you're going to work together. And if you want something different or something more, well, then you can ask if that would be possible and how would that be compensated. And if they say, no, I can't do that, well, that's often because transaction coordinators need to follow a process in order to be able to be consistent and to scale.
Exactly. And most transaction coordinators are working with multiple agents, and
Yes.
they're not just exclusively working with you. And so they should, really good ones, have a clear process, a very clear process of I do this, I don't do this. I completely agree. And I've been incredibly blessed to have we have in-house coordinators that we can hire, and
Nice.
I've luckily I've had one dud, but I've had the best of the best otherwise.
Yeah.
Just absolutely incredible. Them finding and catching things that are 10 steps ahead of you is a game changer. So as somebody's evolving their business, after the hire of the transaction coordinator, if their business is continuing to grow year over year, what's the next smart strategic hire?
It's usually a listing coordinator because usually this is where the business is shifting to more than 50% listings.
Yeah.
And that requires, depending on where you are, right? So you and I, right, worked in San Francisco, and the expectation of perfection at the time of launching is quite high. It is in some other markets around the country as well. That's not always true, but that whole listing prep process is a job.
100%.
Coordinating vendors, construction, painters, lawn care, landscaping, depending on what it is, and then the marketing that goes into that, and then the launch, and then the activities and the events that might go along with that. And so once that plan is set, once that expectation is agreed upon with the seller, then the agent really just needs to communicate well to the listing coordinator about how they want that managed. And then the listing coordinator can really project manage that and keep the agent informed about, okay, we're here. The painter says this, this is the flooring's going on Thursday, and then just update your agent. If you need if you need your agent to step in and negotiate something that's not going well, then you pull your agent in. But otherwise, that process then alleviates the agent to go get another listing. Otherwise, agents get sucked into managing the listing, and now we have a roller coaster of inventory and money.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. Even when you talk about that, it gives me anxiety. Like scheduling and coordinating and meeting with vendors. Genuinely, that's the opposite of my strengths. And so I am so blessed to have somebody who they actually find joy in that, and that's their superpower, and
Yes.
it takes all the pressure off of me.
It's good.
Yeah, it's a total game changer. Okay, so I love this. So when somebody evolves to the point where they have a listing coordinator, what's generally you see what's the successful group doing for their next move?
So this is the shift where now communication and some systematic approaches really can make a difference. So this is the relay race of having an agent, a listing coordinator, or if you might call it an operations manager, you might call it an executive assistant,
Sure.
and a transaction coordinator that maybe doesn't work for you full time, right? You just pay by the deal. Now you have to have a dashboard and some clear communication. So you might want to have a meeting, a stand-up meeting every day for 10 minutes. What's going on between you and your assistant?
Yeah.
Then you might need to be able to see, okay, what's capacity? How many listings can we launch a month, a week? So depending on what your goals are, you want to be able to watch out now for capacity with quality, because capacity is not unlimited. And some admin will feel like they should just be able to keep up no matter how big you want to get. And the answer is that's a fantasy, right?
Sure.
And so for an agent as well, is the goal that you want to do a lot more deals, or is the goal that you want to pick up your kids from school and go to soccer games? And so you want to not work from 2:30 to 5. And now you might work a couple of evenings, but you want to be able to do your prospecting, lead follow-up, and go on listing appointments, but be done by 2:30. So then what does that look like? But if you want to get to 100 deals or 75 deals or 50 or whatever that number is for you, then okay, how can we really now work on efficiency
Interesting.
to be able to have consistent quality without sacrificing a quality of life?
That is so interesting. And so how do you then, it sounds like with the coaching that you do, it's a mix between the building and scaling the business, but actually coaching the individual to figure out, well, what is it that you actually are going after? What do you want? What are you hoping to achieve? Because you're right, like scaling to a 200 million a year business is very different than making sure you're done by 2:30 to pick up the kids. They're completely different directions. And none are wrong. It's just, what target are you actually wanting to hit through the process?
And the quality that you want along the way, because the other thing we're seeing in the workforce is people don't really want to work so much anymore at all costs. They want to work for a person or a company or an organization where they feel like they make a difference. And they also want to have a quality of life. So whatever that looks like to each person. So that's part of the interview process, and it's part of your knowledge as the business owner of what do you stand for. So like, do you give Juneteenth off as a paid holiday? And do you offer vacation time? And do you set up systems so that your assistant isn't working for you every night and every weekend? If you need every night and every weekend support, then we might want to look at a virtual assistant, right, who watches email and voicemail and text messages virtually in the evenings and on weekends to alert the agent that something needs to be handled before Monday morning. So what does it look like to have that kind of quality experience? And if you want to work at all costs and you're just in it for more, well, then you need to have people alongside you that also want that. Otherwise, that starts to become abusive to everyone involved.
Wow. I really appreciate your approach. I talk to a lot of coaches and a lot of agents, and really unpacking like the individual, it sounds like, is really where you kind of initially do that deep dive of like, really, what do you actually want? Because you're right. Like, and I've made, it's as you're sharing this, I'm thinking about all the mistakes I've made and missteps of like,
Me too.
like I want this over here, but I hire this person over here who's like, it's an opposing target. We're never going to get to where it needs to go. And it's funny, but because we talked about grit earlier,
Yeah.
we're in the process of changing the agent interview questions because I find that I haven't been able to find the right people with the right amount of grit
Yeah.
who like they hit an objection and are like, all right, I'm done. And you're like, no, try it. You have to try something else. Like, what do you mean you're done?
Yeah. Yeah. Where's your stickiness? So I have had some clients for 10 years. I've been in business 11 years.
Amazing.
And so I've started to refer to myself as sticky because I'm in it to win it with you.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, you can let me go if you want to. I don't want you to work with me if you don't want to work with me. It's not like they're stuck with me like that, but it's because I'm in it to win it with you. Okay, this is what you want now. These are your goals. Okay, what does the team need? All right, let's do that. So I coach both the agent and their support staff. We coach, some together and then some individually, because the other thing that we're talking about in terms of grit, stick-to-itiveness, be able to get over objections is this is an ever evolving skill set. So what are the skills necessary to communicate like that on the team? What is the skill set for an operations manager to come to their leader and say, I don't really think you should hire people anymore. And this is why, and this is what I can do for you. Will you let me do that? That's a lot of balls.
Yeah. Well,
And it's fantastic, but that's a skill set. And that might have to be taught. If she did that on he or she did that on their own, bravo. And it would also be okay to coach that to the people on the team.
yeah. And I mean, for me, it's like I've kind of like just floundered my way through all of this, but we do a KSI meeting where we measure the non-tangibles of the business. We do it once a month. Then we have an open forum where we can just talk. Everybody can talk freely. Basically at that point, it's a flat organization.
Yes.
And
wonderful.
if you want to call me out, call me out. And that was like, hey, here's what's not working. Here's what needs to change. And it's like, we have another in-house rule, that the 80-20 rule. We spend 20% of the time on the problem and 80% of the time on the solution.
Oh, I love that.
Because I don't want to just spin, because agents
Yes.
are really good at spinning.
Yes, humans are. That is part of human nature, but I just love the culture of the organization you've created. That is wonderful.
It's evolving, and it's I mean, as you know, it's hard work, and it's really strategically hire slow, fire fast, really find those people who adopt it and kind of have it in them, and they will move with it. But I'm really enjoying what you're sharing about, like, how does that then align with what I'm personally going after, and then how does that fit in with the vision of the company, which then how do those individuals fit into that puzzle? I've never looked at it as that deeply. So I definitely appreciate that perspective. And it's to go to your business and being 11 years in and having people who've been with you for 10 of those 11, that's always a true testament of providing value. Like, people don't stay or continue to do something if they're not getting some of their needs met in some capacity. And especially when we're paying for said service. Right. And so that's a huge statement is my point.
Thank you.
Goodness, I feel like I'm really in awe of all of the things that you've gotten to get to this point, and the level of experience and knowledge and intuition that you have is just it's incredible.
Well, thank you. Can we add one more topic in here?
Please.
Because this is a facet of what you just said. So in this experience, I feel like I've backed my way into the structure of the business now by observation and learning the hard way with my clients of seeing, oh, they need to have the right people. So I did hiring. And then, oh, those people need training. So we did training. Oh, those people need coaching. And then we were also, once we got behind the curtain a little more, like, oh, they not only need systems, but they also need to manage their finances.
Oh my gosh, yes.
So we talk about the three-legged stool at Cambium of systems, teamwork, and finances. And that is the stability of your real estate practice.
That is right now, 2024, the most important thing agents should be focusing on, in my opinion.
Yes, because you work hard for this money. And now what is happening to the money? And it has been a part of the culture in the industry that volume will solve everything.
Yeah.
And it's not true.
It's not. The other one that drives me insane is, well, I'll just make another sale.
Yes.
Like, oh, I'm going to buy this, but I'll just make another sale and pay for it. And you're like, no, it doesn't work like that. Uncle
it creates
Sam?
this snowball of anxiety and lack of satisfaction, and that more is the answer. And you can have and want more and get more. That's fine. But what is the flow, and where is it going, and how are you evaluating whether you want to keep doing it that way or you want to shift the way you're doing it? No blame, no judgment. It's
Sure.
just the facts of where is it going and how do you want to deal with that now? And so part of this evolved because over the years I've had 3 clients in debt to the IRS.
Wow.
And I never really thought to ask that question. In my second year of being an agent in San Francisco, I didn't save to pay taxes, and that blew up. And that took 7 years to fix. Because as a commission salesperson, they don't really want to do a deal with you because you have unlimited income potential.
Wow.
So I fixed mine, and then I got systems. And when I started this business, I hired a money coach, and I had her work with me for probably 4 or 5 years. And I'm a Girl Scout when it comes to all of that process. So what I learned from these clients is, one, front row at the conference, top producer, got the special ribbon on her name tag and everything, $300,000 in debt to the IRS. Then I learned another longtime client. He was $250,000 in debt to the IRS. Then a few years later, I had a client. I had learned to ask the question. By then, she was $500,000 in debt to the IRS. Lovely woman. Also top producer, young family. The pressure, unbelievable. So I bring up those stories, right, for myself to be able to let people know if that's where you are, it's okay. But let's fix it. Let's not only fix the issue, but let's fix it from ever happening again, which means you have to do something differently. So as soon as possible, agents should have a bookkeeper. You can have a bookkeeper for like $100 a month. $125 a month is what I pay for the one at my house. And then I have another one I have in my business. And that was the other good thing I did when I started this business. I hired a bookkeeper right away. And he loves to work with real estate agents. In fact, he's developed a system and a team to be able to take care of real estate agents. And so I'm happy to share that information with you. But this is also a control issue sometimes for agents where they need to understand bookkeepers can't move your money. They can't touch your money. The controls are set up so that in QuickBooks, the credit card and the bank account is going into, and they're just categorizing things.
Yeah.
So that part's okay.
It's true. And it's funny. I completely forgot about that, but early on, I hired a bookkeeper and a tax accountant because I wanted to keep as much as I could. And the thing that scared me was, in addition to everything you just shared, which is terrifying how in debt people can get very quick. No judgment, but it happens really quick.
Yeah, especially when you make a lot of money.
Yeah. And you just like, you're not separating it and allocating some, keeping it in reserves for taxes. Oh, I just lost my thought. What was I saying?
It's too terrifying.
It's too terrifying.
But you just did something recently, you were saying.
I don't know. I lost it. It was really good and amazing, and I would love to have shared it.
It will come back.
It'll come back once we stop recording. Listen, Kathleen, this has been just such a joy. I would love to have you back on the show. I feel like we've only scratched the surface, and I would really kind of love to go back and talk about these different categories because they are so incredibly important, especially as this last piece that you just introduced, as the money starts coming in and as you're scaling, managing all the money is incredibly important, and it's usually not a skill that we all have. Oh, and I just remembered what I was going to share is the
Yes.
part that scared me is the IRS audits realtors the most out of any other small business in the US, is what I've heard. I don't know if it's true, but I've heard that.
Well, independent contractors and, just flailing it around.
And then
yeah,
finagling our, oh yeah, that's totally an expense. Don't do that.
right. So compliance, we're good at it, right, when it comes to contracts and disclosures. And so we can be good at it when it comes to bookkeeping and taxes. We can, but we're going to need some help. Like we need the broker and the TC. We're going to need a bookkeeper and a tax accountant.
Totally true. Well, listen, I genuinely appreciate your time. I know we're at the top of the hour and you have another meeting to run to, so I want to respect that. But again, thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, my great pleasure. Look forward to coming back.